Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
It's fitting that the biggest golf tournament in the world starts the day after Detroit's very slim hopes are well and truly torched now.
I did not think about the Red Wings for 1 minute today until I walked into your house. Thank you to the Masters tournament.
The poignant symbolism is a bit much for me. Like the sun is out, birds are chirping, Masters is on, watching the par 3, and any semblance of hope just died on the ice yesterday in the most Red Wings fashion possible. They lost that game. Like that wasn't even a boring loss where you're like, oh, it just happens. Like there was an actual storyline there, which is an actual microcosm of most of the season. I think the only way it would have been worse is if they played a complete game and goaltending burned them, but they just went for a different flavor this time.
It's infuriating because of how predictable it is. And I think that's been the theme of the season.
Anyways,
Good times.
we are pretty sure about the direction we're headed towards now, which is the last chunk of games here, then the offseason. Just means we're going to shift the focus. Folks, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to break down that game against Montreal, Detroit's must-win game, and how that unfolded from a hot start to a heartbreaking end. We're going to get into the draft lottery and draft position and how that all works, because that's what matters now for the Red Wings, whether fans were looking forward to it or not, understanding what they have in store for them over this last little while. Then we're going to jump into NHL news, everything from Montreal getting a potential Russian star to, free agents in the Michigan State sphere maybe being available from the Tampa Bay side of things, news across the league, combining draft and free agency in the future, all of that and more. And then we also have an interview with none other than our really, really good friend, Tony Ferrari, draft analyst, to talk 2025 NHL entry draft, get a good primer on the whole thing. Before all that, I want to let you know that the Winged Wheel Podcast is primarily supported by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to support the show, you get access to benefits like our bonus overtime episodes. We record them right after these main ones. We tell stories, you get bloopers, you get thoughts with Evan, which is always a good time. You hear any questions that weren't answered on the main show get answered there. It's a good time. It's a bit of a different tone, but we have a lot of fun with it. You also are automatically entered into all of our giveaways. For example, we give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game going directly to our Patreon supporters. So those giveaways and more. Additionally, you get access to our Winged Wheel Podcast Patreon exclusive Discord. Phenomenal community. And it's not just hockey. There's, F1 channels, golf channels, Tigers, Lions, Pistons, all of that. It's a great, great place to hang out as well. So again, patreon.com/winged wheel podcast. Detroit's biggest game of the season. Montreal Canadiens in Montreal at the Bell Center. The most rowdy crowd in the league, I think, when they're into it and their team is good. And that's what they are right now, both of those things. And that was pretty much the best start to the game that I think Detroit has had in a game that matters this season.
That might be the best start to a game they've had this season, full stop, not counting actual goals, because obviously it's hard to top that Seattle game. But yeah, they were flying. They silenced the crowd quickly. Montreal did not feel like they had the legs to skate with Detroit. It felt like they didn't have an answer for anything Detroit was throwing at them outside of Sam Montembeault. It was concerningly optimistic, because I think every Red Wings fan probably had the same thought we did, where they were absolutely running Montreal out of their own building, but the score was only 1-0. And you kind of had that sense of, it's coming, isn't it?
First period ends with shots, 25-4, something like that. The scorekeeper kept adjusting shots up and down one, but in that range. And the play on ice looked like that. I will say it's not like Montembeault made a bunch of 10 bell saves. He made a couple really great ones, but Detroit didn't really capitalize and make the most of their opportunities, but they were controlling play. Their power play went 0 for 3 that night, so the power play was ineffective. But the goal they did translate on was Dylan Larkin from Patrick Kane. Kane coming in from the right side displays excellent patience, finds Larkin, who broke an 8-game goalless streak. Great time for the captain to show up, who I think Prashant was pulling stats in the chat. Like, you see the drop in his face-off percentage out of nowhere, like across the board. That's a guy who's dealing with something. Regardless, McLellan has said it a lot. Detroit's best players need to step up. So Larkin scores. Detroit goes up 1, and at that first intermission, there's 2 schools of thought. One was, okay, they're doing the right things, and they just have to keep doing this. And 2 is, I've seen this story. I know how this goes. And after that, man, it was just like a slow, tragic third act to a play that you could see played out.
There was an exact moment in the second period. I think every Wings fan was certain they were losing that game.
When Cole Caufield beat Justin Holl in a battle for the puck in front of the net?
No, I'll give Holl a pass on that one because it's hard to outmuscle a giant like Cole Caufield. Sometimes you're just physically outmatched and things happen. And, he obviously Caufield is such an elite net front presence. Of course, he's going to bang in a rebound like that. So at 1-1, I can give it a pass. Shots were 30-10 for Detroit at that point, but I still had the faith. I'm like, all right, Holl will get that back in the third period. I'm not worried about that. No, the moment I knew they were going to lose is when Sam Montembeault was standing behind his net, looking at JT Compher in the slot with a puck and nothing between him and the net.
He almost put that into the 7th row.
Yeah. And when that puck sailed 3 feet over the net, I went, we're done here. We can go home. 1-1 in the second period. And I think everybody's like, yep, it's not happening tonight.
The puck fluttering when it came off his stick. And so Mickey Redmond even said on air, like, that looks deflected. When I initially posted it, I thought, I actually can't see the deflection, but there's not enough frames here. So, I'm going to go with it. And then you actually shared the TSN frame, which was from behind the net. And no, it was just, we were talking about it off air, but his stick was in tight and he just like chipped that thing over the net rather than like he tried to command the puck, get control of the puck, and then shoot. He should have just blasted it.
I respect the hell out of him for trying to go bar down on an empty net, though.
Yeah, because what happened there is he had 3 options in that moment. 2 were great options, and 1 was a terrible option. I don't need to tell you which one he picked, but we'll go through them. 1, you're staring at a wide open net, and I think it was Gooley was still out of frame. If he had shot that right away, no matter how uncertain or however little he would have gotten behind it, rushing the shot, it still would have went in because there was literally nothing between him and the net. Gooley wouldn't have got there. Montembeault was directly behind the net, so he couldn't reach around with his stick to stop it or anything like that. That's option 1. The next best option would be you hold it, you really settle it down. Yes, Gooley might get in your way at that point, but he's a defenseman with an open net behind you. You should be able to, hammer it past a foot or a shin and still comfortably score that goal. The option Compher chose was he took an extra second, not a lot of time, to, I would say, settle the puck, but he didn't even really do that because his release point on the shot was way too close to his feet relative to the lie of his stick. So essentially the heel of his blade doesn't get flat on the ice and he's kind of chipping at it with the toe of his stick. And to steal a golf term here, it's like he was using a wedge, essentially, is what happened there. And he just got under it, it went up, and it didn't even come close to going in the net. So again,
He choked it.
And it's like, you can say, yes, that's a hard shot to take. But that's why I laid out the other 2 options, because this is a professional NHL player making north of $5 million a year. That is a play you have to make, especially given the game and the circumstance. And Montreal had just tied the game. Like, you have to score that.
And he's been on a tear too, where he's been really pushing back against a lot of that. Oh, Compher's been bad this year. Like this little mini stretch, he's been producing. Like he's been scoring for Detroit, big moments, etc. And I was like, you could have been. That was his hero to zero moment. Like the focus was on the miss, but that wasn't a wide open net. And McLellan said after the game, like that would have changed the game. Like you had that. Raymond had not a full on breakaway, but he had an unimpeded break down the side and with a prime opportunity to shoot. And he just missed. He tried to go opposite side of the net and just missed the net. And McLellan said, like, you score either of those with how you're playing that game, you're in control. It's not like Montreal was all over them and Detroit was lucky to be on the board. That was Detroit's game. They had every opportunity to win that in regulation. There's two sides of why they lost, and we're about to get into the other side of it, but the missed opportunities offensively, and they weren't bailed out by the power play this game. It hurts that it was so poignant. It hurts that you were looking at a wide open cage. It hurts that you were looking at Lucas Raymond breaking down and having an opportunity for a free shot. And that guy's just been money when he's had the time and space. And so, yeah, that one was... You tweeted something, Brad, that made me laugh, which doesn't happen usually. But I think you said something like, I think they're doing it on purpose.
They have to be.
That one felt specifically designed in a lab just to extract what little hope there was left out of Red Wings fans and tear it into 5 pieces.
Especially that first period.
Like, oh, and let's all be real. Coming into this game, if Detroit won in regulation against Montreal, they still needed to outpace Montreal by a win over the course of the last chunk of games of the season, 5 or so. It's still not likely that Detroit wins out and Montreal loses one more than Detroit wins, but they had an opportunity. You know, I think the actual odds would have been like 13% or something like that, but it was way more than the sub 5% they've been dealing with. They were back in the mix. So no one's coming in saying, oh yeah, the Red Wings lost the playoffs last night. The Red Wings lost the playoffs when they went on that 6-game losing skid not too long ago. They lost the playoffs when they lost 2 in a row against Columbus. They lost the playoffs over the course of a good chunk of the season. But yeah, this was a nice little 3-act play, each play being its own period that hurt. And then the third period, well, I can't, like, the second period, Cole Caufield scored because he beat Justin Holl in front of the net, as Brad was talking about. You know, the massive Cole Caufield, all 5'8" of him. So that's a tie game. The third period, Josh Anderson scores. And Christian Dvorak has the primary assist. Brendan Gallagher has the secondary, but you got to give Vladimir Tarasenko one of those.
My God.
That play was just a comedy of errors from start to finish.
Yeah. The Montreal Canadiens goal that they scored started with a Red Wings pass from the half wall in the Montreal zone. Like, Tarasenko, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and assume he's just colorblind. He put a pass on, I don't even remember which Montreal Canadian it was. Doesn't matter.
Josh Anderson.
It was Josh Anderson. He went to go far point, and there wasn't a Red Wing there. And if there was, he was 10 feet behind the Montreal Canadian that was actually standing there. And just leads Montreal's breakout. So now it's an odd man rush. Puck gets into Detroit's zone in the corner, so they're in a pretty good spot there for defending a rush. When you can force them into that spot, you're doing all right. Then once again, the tiny Justin Holl loses a battle to the mighty, gigantic Brendan Gallagher, who then gets the puck to Dvorak, who puts it cross ice to Josh Anderson, who buries it into the empty net. I wish I could stop describing the play there. But no, why was he open? Because Albert Johansson lost his helmet, and if you play the puck without a helmet, it's a penalty. He picked it up and was trying to get it back on, because you are allowed to do that in the rulebook. If you toss it back on quickly, you don't even need to do up the strap. You can keep playing, but by then it was too late. But even with the bad luck for Johansson, there were 2 Red Wings who could have covered for him, and there are 2 Red Wings in the vicinity who know the rule. You can't play a puck without a helmet. So who would have saw Johansson without his helmet and decided to not cover for him? And
there's also, depending on how much you want to lean on Johansson, there's like the right decision in that time would have been you take the penalty.
Just take the penalty, yeah.
Once you know the outcome, yeah.
Yeah, it's a split-second decision, so you understand how they got there, but I think a more veteran Johansson won't be making that decision. I've always hated that rule, just as a sidebar. I've hated that rule because I think about plays like this, and this is the first big consequential one I've seen. But yeah, from the start, with Tarasenko leading the breakout to the helmet coming off and Johansson leaving to go get it and no one picking the guy up and Holl just kind of doing what he does and Tarasenko skating by, like it was just a comedy of errors. And in a game where Detroit was doing what they needed to do to control play, it was what has been ailing them all season that did them in on that goal and ultimately the game.
I've held the opinion for a while that hockey is a superstar league. You can make do with a roster as is, as long as you have the horses at the top of the roster. It's a strong link game. And as the season has gone on, my opinion on that has shifted to it's a weak link game. Because the Red Wings horses played well that game. And they were undone by, like, you can literally isolate both goals against to Justin Holl and Vladimir Tarasenko. That has got to be so frustrating if you're Cam Talbot, if you're Dylan Larkin, if you're Alex DeBrincat, any of the guys who are carrying their weight, Sider, Edmondson, and then just hilariously bad plays ruin it. Like, I'm not going to say tank the season because, as Ryan pointed out, they had a bad October, November, December, March. They lost their season well before this, but just the coffin nails were a little too on the nose this year.
Like I said, microcosm of what's been ailing them. You watch that game and you're like, this isn't a playoff team. You still want to make it, but with how they lost it, yeah, it felt like the hockey gods, the hockey universe, the narrative, like, yeah, no, this team isn't a playoff team this year, and for the same reason we've been talking about for all those months that Brad listed. And it points to the changes that are going to come in the offseason or should come in the offseason. It's the slow death that gets you about this because you've been watching it unfold for so long. It's the same as last year, but in a different way, it's not the same as last year. You talked the last episode, Brad, about the context of seeing it be Ottawa and now most likely Montreal who are going to make it. We'll see how everything finishes out, but you peg yourself to those teams over the course of your rebuild and recently, and I'm adamant that this is just one outcome, one season. Rebuilds aren't linear, and let's see how the trend goes before we establish anything, because it's not like Ottawa and Montreal were killing it all year. But yeah, you can't ignore it. They made it this year, and Detroit didn't. And frankly, the roster they had was simultaneously not far off, but also you can't have Tarasenko and Holl and others having that much ice time. So it's what we've all known, and this was just like it felt like a final act of that, even though there's still 5 games left.
Yeah, I think it mostly comes down to the math, right? Like you said earlier, if Detroit had won that game, that's a 4-point game. They bring themselves closer. They just have to outpace Montreal. But the Red Wings and the Rangers, both teams just did not want to seize that opportunity. They don't need to be a quote-unquote playoff team. They just have to be better than Ottawa or Montreal. And if you want to quantify them as true playoff teams, whatever, they just had to be better than them. And truthfully, they weren't.
So after that loss, Detroit has 79 points in 77 games. They are 8 points back of Montreal. Detroit does have a game in hand, but still 8 points back with 5 games to play. If Detroit wins out, they get to 89 points. Montreal has 87 with 4 games left.
So 3 points for Montreal, and the Red Wings are mathematically done.
Yeah, and that's assuming Detroit wins everything. So
yeah.
That's pretty much all she wrote for Detroit. Now, what you are looking at if you're a Red Wings fan is the draft lottery, but more realistically, just your draft standings overall. Detroit is currently 21st in the NHL overall. You sort by points percentage too. They're still 21st in the NHL overall. That is good for their 12th overall draft pick. The way the draft lottery works is that there are 2 draws, a draw for the first pick and a draw for the second pick. If a team from outside the 11 worst teams in the NHL, Detroit would be the first team outside of that right now, they still win the lottery, quote unquote, but they only move up 10 picks. So they can go up to second spot at best. They can't go up to first. So they still have odds to have the lottery balls chosen, but it's not, they won't win the overall draft lottery. So that's worth stating there. Realistically, where Detroit is right now, they're not going to drop that much further. And what you also have to remember is that this isn't the same as, the getting into a wild card spot. The teams below them aren't likely to pass them because they suck. They're at the bottom of the league for the reason. The Islanders were winning with 10 minutes left last night, blew the game. So below Detroit, the Islanders tied at 79 points. The Blue Jackets tied at 79 points. The Sabres, 3 points behind.
The red hot Buffalo
8-2
Sabres.
in their last 10 Buffalo Sabres.
Hell yeah, Sabres.
You think the memes in Detroit are strong? Oh my God, Buffalo is doing it again.
They're
missing the playoffs and then getting hot when it doesn't matter to hurt their draft spot.
I love that so much. Hell yeah, guys. Get it. The Ducks are 3 points behind, and those teams all have 5 games to play. Pittsburgh has 3 games to play and is 3 points behind. Seattle is 5 points behind with 3 games to play. Boston, 6 points behind with 3 games to play. You're not getting down that far.
No, you realistically, in a best case scenario, Columbus, the Islanders, Buffalo, and maybe you can lump Anaheim in there, can pass the Red Wings, but that's about where I would end it at the even somewhat realistic category.
Yeah, it's not looking likely that they're going to jump into the fray for any kind of notable chance, but it's still there, and that's what you're looking at for the Red Wings. You're looking at as many Islanders, Blue Jackets, Sabres, Ducks, etc. wins for the rest of the season. I'm never going to sit here and say, yeah, root for the Red Wings to lose. The players on the ice are never going to try to lose, right? I've been saying this for the past however many episodes.
But they may have the inability to win.
As we've seen by 4-5-1 in their last 10 in crunch time.
There are ways. Dylan Larkin's clearly battling something. Shut him down.
Yeah,
rest him. Do not risk it.
Bring it. Grand Rapids clinched. I know you're not trying to disrupt that team anymore.
Bring me Nate Danielson. Give him a 5-game look. I don't care. Yes, we want Grand Rapids to do well, but the focus is the big club.
Especially for him.
Yeah, let's get some context. What does Danielson look like in the NHL? And give him some context so he knows what to expect next year and what he's working towards. Maybe Sebastian Costa too.
That's where Detroit is at right now. It's bleak to look at the end, but this was what's been coming. It was just like one last shot at it with Montreal. But yeah, we're talking draft positioning, lottery balls.
We've never had this conversation before, so it'll be a really fun new content we can talk about.
Yeah, we're really gonna have to explore new areas of our brains and conversations that just we've never been in this territory.
At least we get the summer off and we can just play old episodes, summer episodes, and enjoy our time.
For someone who doesn't follow prospect stuff, they would hear the names from previous years and be like, yeah, those are guys from this year.
Sure, why not?
Who cares?
I really think the Red Wings are going to take a long, hard look at Bowen Byram this draft.
I mean, if Evan's mock drafting him, we're going to do a mock draft soon. Hell yeah.
Oh, no.
It's Evan's worst nightmare.
How many? Who's the Anton Lundell of this draft where I take them 4 times?
It's Bowen Byram.
We'll find out. Stay tuned.
All I'm thinking of for our not just my well-being, all of our well-being, I'll be a team player here. How can we not do the draft lottery live stream, but still do the draft lottery live stream?
Yeah.
I want to do it again. I know we need to do it again, but every fiber of my being wants to protest it out of just moral fabric.
Evan's hot tub. They'll win if we live stream from Evan's hot tub.
I know I'm on the road to being a professional athlete in pickleball, but this body is not going on a camera with a shirt off anytime soon.
I saw the picture that came in the pickleball group chat. I was like, yoink, that one's being saved.
Yeah,
Thank
not
you.
Great. Mind you, that was after an entire guy's golf trip, so
lots of pepperoni
a
involved,
lot of carbs were digested before that photo was taken.
Yeah, that's for our Patreon exclusive subscribers. We'll throw that one in the Discord. Actually, no, that will make it out of the Discord so fast.
Yeah, that can't go in there. That's for sure. That's part of my dead man switch.
This is a little primer to the offseason. that's where Detroit is at. Upcoming, their schedule is on the road. They have Florida, then Tampa Bay, Thursday and Friday back-to-back. They're back in Detroit on Monday for the final home game of the season against the Dallas Stars, and then they finish on the road Wednesday and Thursday, 16th and 17th, New Jersey and Toronto back-to-back, and that would be all 82. Let's get bleak. Okay, let's take a quick break here to hear from the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast, and when we're back, more from the world of hockey back after this. What can happen in 3 to 6 months? You could pick up a new hobby and get not that good at it yet. You could make a push for the playoffs like you do every year, only to fall apart in March again like you do every year. Or you can start seeing thicker, fuller hair regrowth through Hims. That's not bad for just 3 to 6 months. Look, hair loss is something most guys deal with, especially as we get older, and I'm definitely not immune to it. That's why we love how easy Hims makes it. You don't have to deal with awkward doctor visits or sit around in a waiting room. Everything is online and it's fast. They use real, clinically proven ingredients, and the treatments can be personalized to what works best for you. Whether it's chewables, oral meds, sprays, or serums, Hims helps you figure out the right fit. You just answer a few quick questions, a licensed medical provider reviews it, and if treatment is right for you, it gets sent straight to your door. No hassle, no weird pharmacy runs, just consistent, reliable treatment that can get your hair looking thicker and fuller over time. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/wingedwheel. That's HIMS.com/wingedwheel for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/wingedwheel. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. So with the online discourse right now, the discourse within the world of the Red Wings being very obviously what went wrong, what are you going to do about the problem contracts, roster spots on this team, etc. It's setting the tone. We know what the conversation is going to be as we wrap up this season and head into the summer. That's what is coming in addition to the draft content, in addition to the free agency content. And, we were just having conversations off air here about, free agency targets. That's all something that you can look forward to. So I know people have been asking, why haven't you been talking about X, Y, or Z player? Because whenever you talk free agency, you just kind of use like Marner as the example for forwards or Gavrikov as the example for defense. There are, broader targets rather than just the obvious names. And now that we know the playoffs are out of reach, that's what you're going to, that's what we're going to start to dedicate time to when games wrap up. So that's what's coming. For now, let's talk about some NHL news before we get into our interview with Tony. First, while we just wrapped up talking about Montreal, let's talk about Montreal. Demidov coming over sooner than expected. And if you ever want an indication that Russian players have the weirdest transitions to the NHL and you can never predict anything, minutes prior, it was thought that he was not going to be released from his contract in Russia and that they were going to keep him there. And, no matter how bad the relationship was, he just wasn't going to come over. And then very quickly, the news changed into he's coming. Montreal has him signed to an ELC. And this next potential Russian star in the mold of Michkov or others is on his way and in Detroit's division and with a direct rival to Detroit.
Thanks. I hate it.
Just as they essentially clinched their playoff berth as well.
Oh, yeah. We didn't even talk about the Detroit loss clinching Ottawa's playoff spot for them while we're talking about how awful everything is and how good things are for the Eastern Canadian NHL teams.
For now, we'll see how the playoffs go, but
they're there. Do you know what I would give to be swept in the first round of the playoffs right now?
It's a weird kick.
Every game could be 7-0. Just get there.
Demidov, though, is like we talked a lot in those drafts, like the Demidov draft, the Michkov draft. Those guys had the kind of talent to be at the top of their drafts or close to it, and they fell because of the risk factor associated with them. Sometimes teams prefer to defensemen. Sometimes teams prefer to what they viewed as a more premium player. But by talent, Philadelphia with Michkov, Montreal with Demidov, it looks like they drafted guys well above their draft slot in terms of the talent that they're potentially getting here. And I think it's Montreal, so it's well overhyped. Lane Hutson isn't the already a Norris Trophy defenseman, no matter what they'll have you believe. But like Demidov is worth a lot of that hype factoring in the Montreal bias.
Oh, he's so damn good. Like, he is like, I don't think he's Michkov, but he's right there. I think he was my number 2 firmly in the last draft, just like Michkov was in the Bedard draft. I get the Russian factor, but I think everything's revisionist history. I feel like I remember we all push back against that, going, yeah, we know he's Russian, but he's so damn good, you take the risk.
You trade up for it if you even can.
Yeah. Ugh, annoying. But either way, like, he's so fun to watch. He's sick. I don't know if, in the middle of a playoff race and what will be a playoff series, how impactful he can be adjusting to North America, but man, he's good enough. He might be.
It's another sign of, like, and not to make excuses here, but you're like, how did Montreal add all of this talent? Well, first off, they drafted extremely well. I think you add Lane Hutson, that's a massive boon, even if it's just one guy. But you see where they drafted, however many years there, you get an opportunity to get that top end talent. There were a lot of teams, but not too many teams who had the opportunity at the Demidovs, the Michkovs. Detroit just wasn't in that position. And that's what killed. Looking at the outside, you're like, God, if I was just a few spots higher or in that next tier higher, then you potentially could have made that move to grab them. It's a huge hit to this kind of mini arms race of the teams trying to come out of the bottom of the Atlantic, and a massive boost to Montreal. They have a world of talent. And Nick Suzuki also has firmly established himself. I think he's the real deal. That's not a hot take anymore. He's their number 1 centerman, and I think he's good enough the same way I think Larkin's good enough to lead their teams. Like, they have a lot to work with there. They're not a perfect team. I think they're far from a cup contender, so to speak, but they've taken a leap.
I really like their team because they've got a lot of young players there who haven't developed the veteran scar tissue. They think that they can just go up against anybody, and if they lose, well, it was a learning experience. They gave it their best, and if they win, the vibes are high and they feel like they can do anything. There's something about this Montreal team right now that has me worried for the future, especially as a Red Wings fan. And now that Demidov is coming over and was on skill the second best player in his draft, it's got me really concerned. But I just really like how Montreal's sort of approached this season. They were one of the last place teams in the league at points in the season this year. So we'll see how they fare in the playoffs. They're going to walk into a wagon, but they're getting that playoff experience before the Detroit Red Wings, which is a huge, huge leg up on them going forward.
Well, last time Montreal played Washington in the first round of the playoffs as an 8 seed. Anyway, some of you are old enough to remember the Jarl Halak glory days.
Oh, man. There's nothing that could beat that guy.
No, that was one of the craziest playoff series I've ever seen a goalie play. But is it crazy that if we're talking this from a Red Wings perspective going forward, I'm more worried about Montreal than Ottawa? I think what we saw from Ottawa this year,
we know more about them.
I think this is what they are. Like, all their players were playing to their potential. They don't have a farm system. Allmark was at the peak of his game. Yes, they were very good this year, and they absolutely earned that spot, and they might even get into a divisional spot. Like, I'm not saying Ottawa's bad. They're good. But I think this is pretty close to their ceiling, unless they make some dramatic moves in free agency or via trade. I look at Montreal. I look at what they're doing this year. They still can add Demidov, Reinbacher, Jacob Fowler, and a lot of the guys on their team are still so young. You can expect more from a Lane Hutson, a Uri Slavkovsky. Like, there is still a lot of growth and a lot of prospects to infuse into this Montreal roster, whereas Ottawa kind of is what they are.
I like Allmark a lot better than Montembeault, though, and I think if you have multiple teams in the same tier, and feel how you will about the Red Wings or the Canadiens or the Senators, those were teams in the same tier for a lot of this season. Goaltending made the difference for Ottawa, right? Like, we saw Allmark drag Ottawa out of a funk when Detroit's goaltending dragged them into one at one point.
But if you look at Allmark's contract and age, I'm not saying he'll be bad during that contract, but it's not all that long. 3 or 4 more years, whereas do you know who was going toe-to-toe with Trey Augustine in the NCAA to be the best goalie this year? Jacob Fowler. So I'm not saying he's going to hit for sure. It's goalies, the whole voodoo thing. But man, Montreal has so much room to grow. Like, they have the formula to not just be Ottawa. They have the formula to be a lot better than Ottawa. And again, as much as I think overall Detroit's prospect pool is a lot stronger than Montreal's, we don't have a Demidov. And that could be a game changer. That could be the difference.
I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and rank which one I'm more worried about. I see what you're saying. And I think for the Flash, yeah, I see Montreal. I'm like, geez. But I also, I want to be cognizant of the fact that things are bleak right now for Detroit because they just lost. You also look at where this team is. How much, if you swap out one top 6 forward, one top 4 defenseman, one bottom pair defenseman, how much better is this team in the standings? That's a big ask. I don't want to make that seem like a small thing. I think that's like, they're undoubtedly a wild card.
And you could even just look at that and go Danielson, Sandin Pellikka, and Buyam. But that's a 3 to 4 year plan. Things will change between now and then on the rest of the roster. But I'm not saying Detroit's light years behind them. It's just
Montreal took a big leap, man.
The biggest difference, Ottawa and Montreal in the playoffs already. Detroit isn't.
I thought it was that one of them spoke French and the other one crosses over to get cheap beer in French.
I mean, both have their advantages and disadvantages, right, Evan?
Yes, and that disadvantage is shared between the two.
All right, that's enough waxing poetic about how great it is for Montreal right now. I think people feel bad enough. I'm, from a hockey perspective, excited to see Demidov play. From a Red Wings perspective, not excited to see how Demidov plays. But
right now, as things shape up, if the playoffs started today, we would have the Toronto Maple Leafs playing the Ottawa Senators in the first round.
As a hockey fan, yes, please, God, yes.
Hard disagree. I want Montreal, Toronto so badly, man. Those two fan bases deserve each other with full vitriol. Look, there's two.
But we had Toronto, Montreal recently. We haven't had Toronto, Ottawa in a long ass. There are many, many, many people listening to this right now who weren't alive the last time Toronto played Ottawa.
Montreal, Ottawa still play each other.
Right? It could flip.
Either way, I think this is great.
Here's my thing. Okay, think about this.
My worry actually is Tampa passes Toronto and ruins this whole thing.
Yeah, that would be bad.
What would hurt Toronto the most? Yeah, losing to Ottawa would suck. But are they really going to lose to the Montreal Canadiens again when the Canadiens beat them in the bubble and went to the Cup final in a path that Toronto should have looked at and said, that could have been our year? If Toronto loses to Montreal again, one, that is the most heartbreaking possible outcome for Toronto, more likely to jettison Marner. Two, that is the most hilarious outcome. If Toronto beats Montreal, probably civil war in Canada, which, would be the least surprising
Evan's
geopolitical.
biggest fear is happening. Oh no, the French are forming. They're crossing the border.
They're coming. Ontario.
The battle between those two fan bases, I just don't want, because you think Toronto is annoying, like that fan base. Montreal,
they're Toronto, but they speak French.
Yeah, it's like nobody can gas themselves up like a delusional, all-in Montreal fan base, and that's what makes it beautiful there. Like a rocking Bell Center is genuinely like the hockey mecca.
Tickets for that series would cost $4 million US.
But my God, you're going to be able to hear it from across North America. There's no wrong answer here as long as there's some kind of intra-Canadian battle. I think it
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, also, if we get a Toronto versus Ottawa or Montreal, that means we're getting Tampa, Florida, which from a pure hockey standpoint, sign me up for that over Toronto, Ottawa, or Montreal.
Agreed.
The fan bases are what would make the Canadian series fun. The hockey would make the Battle of Florida even better.
Anyways, all right. Speaking of Tampa Bay, let's jump into Isaac Howard. Elliot Friedman reported something interesting today that Isaac Howard is going back to Michigan State, which was a little bit surprising. The Lightning were apparently promoting him to be a Hobey Baker candidate. He's a finalist this year. The star forward is apparently not on the same page as Tampa Bay, going back to college another year, which means Isaac Howard could be on the table if other teams show interest, because if Tampa doesn't think that they're going to be able to retain his rights, he's going to be a UFA at the end of the year after another season, and that is they're not going to lose him for nothing. Isaac Howard could be an ad.
Yes, absolutely. Detroit should be all over this. And this is one of those instances where we talk ad nauseum. Detroit's not a destination. It's hard for them to lure players. He's playing at Michigan State. He's right there. He's been here the whole time. Like, if you're ever going to recruit a potential unrestricted college free agent, this might be the one to do it. Or, like I said, if you want to get ahead of it and make a trade with Tampa, if you're allowed to talk to him and he says, yes, I would sign there, then of course you do that as well.
I think you absolutely get ahead of it and try to trade for him. You don't wait patiently for this kind of thing. You've learned in the NHL, and I think this modern era of pro sports, if you want a guy, you go and get him. You pay for him.
And they've got some leverage too. Maybe he wants to play in the AHL or play potentially at the NHL level with his countermate, Trey Augustine.
Right? So
there are enticing pieces for Isaac Howard to want to play in Detroit or play in Michigan.
That's one to keep an eye on. Did you guys see the Vancouver comeback? 3 goals in a minute?
That's crazy.
I unfortunately have eyes, yes.
First time in NHL history.
3 goals in a minute. I remember a while back, I think Detroit with 31 seconds left was down 2 and they won in overtime. And I was like, I don't know if I'll ever see that again from the Red Wings.
3 goals in the final minute of play to tie the game. 2 of them coming from
former Red Wings.
Pius Suter.
24 goals, is it?
Oh, God.
That one hurts to see. I am vindicated on Pius Suter because I said he could leave the Red Wings and get a raise elsewhere. And I was fairly laughed at because I was very wrong. He got a contract for pretty much half as much money with Vancouver for a couple of years. But I was like, that seems like a discount. And he's playing his heart out in a contract year. And my God, I was right just way too early. Pius Suter is going to get his raise this year. And boy, has he been efficient for Vancouver. 24 goals, 21 assists in 77 games. Could have used that this season. Mind you, he hadn't done that before, so I'm not going to say that if Detroit kept him, it would have been guaranteed, but it's it's a little hard to watch. Vancouver's, their season, they are also looking pretty bleak right now too, so they're having a lot of the same conversations. Dallas, though. If you're a Dallas fan, are you nervous about that?
It's not a great look right before the playoffs.
Yeah. You don't want to be doing that too much.
And they were gaining on Winnipeg for that division lead. And that's probably the most important division to win because you avoid Colorado in the first round winning that division. And
who has loaned Gabriel Landeskog for a conditioning stint, which is, if he can come back and be half the player he was, that's a huge upgrade for them.
I'm not a Colorado Avalanche guy, obviously. Every Red Wings fan should root against the Avalanche, but you're so far removed from that rivalry. I'm a big Gabe Landeskog guy. And the further away we got from his initial onset of injury, the less I believed that he was going to come back. So it's just really cool that he's even on the ice at all. I hope this works for his sake.
Yeah, me too. He's another one of those fake Swedes. Says he's from Sweden, has 0 accent. And he doesn't even have the Kitchener accent.
All right, one last note here. Frege also noted that the league is already looking like they're going to go away from their one-time, remote draft / scaled back draft thing. Count on the NHL and the teams, in this case, flip-flopping. What do you think of the solution that's proposed to solve the whole, there's not enough time in the calendar, all the travel and stuff, making it all one big event? Awards, draft, free agency over like a set 3 or 4 day period, all in one location.
I love it. I love it. 1, because I would go, because that would just be an absolute party the whole time. 2, because we've seen it when GMs get together, things happen. Like, it's easier to have a face-to-face conversation, hash things out. Might see more trades, might see more movement on the draft floor. It would create a lot of interesting buzz if, we go into this offseason, for example, and it's the awards, then the draft and free agency, and Mitch Marner's floating around. He's there. His agent's there. Everybody's following him. Oh, who's he meeting with? Where's he going? And you get that fun little puzzle that you put together of people are probably trying to find out which teams are staying in which hotels and where's he going. I don't know. I just think the entertainment aspect of it would be phenomenal.
If it leads us to being done with hockey earlier in June, I vote for that.
there's going to be players complaining about they're not, the players aren't going to be there, but the agents will be. And I think that's how it's most likely to go. But if it stops the whole kind of fake, we don't talk to players before free agency, like if you bake that all into the pie there and you just make a show of it, I would, much like Evan, prefer things to be done sooner. But if this just helps things along and makes it all a little bit easier to handle, I will say I personally like it when it's more spread out. But I also want hockey to be done early June. Like June 5th, I want the cup to have been awarded.
Absolutely.
And if the series is shorter, then it should happen May 31st or whatever it is. Do the draft and then a couple weeks later do free agency. But this is not a bad halfway solution. I would be down to at least try it.
Why not?
Just to see. That would be a hell of a live stream. We're
on hour 38. The room smells like...
We had to burn down the new studio.
Yes.
We lost Evan to the craps table on day 2.
But we did get someone who looks remarkably like Evan.
And one of those guys who hands out the cards on the strip. He's here now.
It turns out it's Shea Weber. Largely the same opinion, so we'll take it.
Oddly enough, we didn't plan it. We just saw him on the street, genuinely thought it was Evan, and he didn't question it all the way up to the room.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it'd be fun. I would want it to be in Vegas every time.
Oh, it would have to be in Vegas every time.
You'd have to convince the players to go.
Oh, I'm sure that'd be a tough one.
No, I'm saying you have to be in Vegas so you can convince them.
Oh, yeah.
Anyhow, okay. What we're going to do next is jump into our interview with Tony Ferrari about the 2025 NHL Draft in lieu of a profile today. And then after that, we're going to jump into Overtime, the final segment of the Winged Wheel podcast. Back after this. Tony, it's telling that we got on and it's been a while since we've caught up, and the first things we were talking about is, it's a tough time for Red Wings right now.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be my escape, man.
I mean, if you're into pain and suffering, you can be a Red Wings fan, or you can be into pain and suffering a little later in the year and be a Leafs fan when they lose to the Ottawa Senators in the first round.
Okay, no, we were talking. I do think Montreal is the better battle for outside viewing, though, because that is more rabid.
Yeah, here's the thing, though. If Ottawa beats Toronto, they might literally just go to Toronto and stab people for fun. Like, Ottawa's crazy. Montreal would at least be like somewhat respectful about it, but it would be fun. I think either of those series would be fun. I feel bad for Toronto fans when they lose, though.
Yeah, well, that makes one of us. All right, well, speaking of feeling bad for fans, the Red Wings are now staring down the barrel of what a lot would describe as the mushy middle. Currently, they are positioned in the 12th draft position, which means even if they win the lottery, they would only move up to second and not first. So, with all of that said, we have to prime ourselves more and more. We've already started prospect profiles, but we have to prime ourselves on the 2025 NHL entry draft class. And I'll still ask you about the top guys and all that matters, but we're also going to get into who the Red Wings may be looking at in the more reasonable range. This is, again, the MBN kind of range that they've been in.
It's an interesting year. Like that's the thing with this year is you have those top guys, so Misa, Schaefer, Martone, Hagens, those guys, but there's a lot of interesting value is what I'll say beyond those guys.
Okay, let's start with the draft class overall. Is this a thin draft? Like, is there a steep drop off at like 5 or 6, or what's that number for you? Or is that kind of a misnomer in your mind? I haven't had your take on that yet.
It's weird because I think there's now a solidified top 2, and whether you want to go forward or defense, you've got Misa and Schaefer up there. And then you have a few guys in the Martone, Hagens, Eklund, maybe Frondell tier of players. And then there's a drop off of, here's this guy who has this one trait or a few traits that are really high end, and then it kind of drops off because that player also has these glaring flaws. I think a lot of draft classes have this. I just think that drop comes a little bit sooner this year. A guy like Carter Bear, absolutely fantastic player, relentless, but like he just cut his Achilles. He's going to be a player that really relies on his motor and speed. can you depend on a player like that? How high is the upside? And I think that's the question for a lot of these guys is, where's the upside? I mean, a guy that's been talked about in the top 5 all year, Roger McQueen, has played about 12 games all year. And when he finally came back, he started to get going, and then he was pulled from action again because, I'm going to be honest with you, when you're 6'5" and you have a pars fracture in your back, that's not a good thing. Especially when the prognosis is rest and relaxation is what helps that. So there's a lot of question marks beyond the top 3, 4, 5 names.
All right, you mentioned the top 2, and I think I pre-collisioned with the post. A lot of people, if not most, were saying Schaefer, but Misa's name has been coming up more. Where are you? Because as I understand it, you haven't wavered in who you think should be at the top.
I've been Misa all year, but Schaefer is a really special talent. I think with Misa, you're getting this all-around, do-it-all, highly intelligent, highly cerebral center. I look at him and I go, man, imagine John Tavares skated 10 times better than he does. Like, that's the kind of player Michael Misa is. He's truly a special talent, a guy that thinks the game at an elite level, does all the little details really, really well, and has some explosive skating. He's not Nathan McKinnon. He's not Connor McDavid, don't get me wrong, but he's a guy that can get moving up and down the ice better than just about any player in this draft class, and he does so with power and intelligence and excellent reads. I think he's a number 1 center, and maybe the only guy in this draft class that can be a true number 1 center. And then with Schaefer, you have this high-end cerebral defenseman who plays in every situation. His offensive game is fantastic. The things he can do with the puck as a skater are really, really elite. Like, there's some things that we're seeing with Quinn Hughes, with Lane Hutson, with Cale Makar that Schaefer does. And while I don't think he's quite Quinn Hughes to Cale Makar, he can be in that next tier of really high-end offensive guys. And he's got a really solid defensive game as well. I think no one gives him credit for the defensive game he plays, because it's not that physical, beat you up in the corners defensive game. It's simply just he skates just as good as anyone in the world, and then when they come in the offensive zone, he simply swipes the puck off their stick and gets moving the other way before the player even realizes it. So the top 2 is really, really solid. Maybe not franchise-altering players in the way of a Connor Bedard, the Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, but really, really solid players that you can build around and be a truly elite in the NHL.
A guy that I've seen a split on is Anton Frondell. I've seen people be pretty certain that, the lower half of the top 10 is where he belongs, but I tend to think he's closer to that next tier, maybe below the top 2. And there's a growing kind of voice of, Frondell is right there with Hagens and Martone if you're considering those guys. Where does Frondell sit for you?
Yeah, Frondell's been kind of at 5 or 6 all year long for me. He's my number 2 Swede behind Victor Eklund, who is absolutely fantastic. But Frondell is, again, a combination of power and speed that really doesn't get talked about very much. Some people talk about his pace needing to move up, and I agree there are some moments where his pace is an issue, but this is a kid who in the last 2 years has lost 8-10 months of playing time during season because he's just been injured. And it's unfortunate, and you don't want to see that, but every time he seemed to come back stronger, and his play at the end of this season was absolutely fantastic. He brings a lot of what people were seeing from Leo Carlson in the last couple of years, a guy that has the skill, has the ability to kind of finish in tight, finish from distance, use some of his playmaking ability, work off the boards really well. He brings that solid two-way ability at the center position, and a lot of people think he's going to be a winger, but I think he can slot in as a number 2 center and be a guy that, let's say Detroit drafts him, kind of pushes a Casper and a Danielson down to be third line centers. And then you don't have to ask the question, which of those 2 guys are going to be the second line center, because Frondell is a step up from both those guys, both offensively and even defensively.
And you mentioned Eklund. You actually have him ahead of Frondell. So that was interesting because we talked about Eklund as well. And to me, I see Frondell as being a little bit more dynamic. And so what do you see in Eklund that puts him above Frondell in your mind?
For me, it's close, but with Victor Eklund, he's just a dog on a bone. He has all the skill. He's not quite as big, but he's relentless. He's fast. He forechecks hard. He takes on guys in the corner. This kid's an absolute battler. I watch him go up against dudes in the corner that are 3 inches, 4 inches taller than him, 50 pounds heavier than him, and he's coming out with the puck. He just has this ability to kind of get under guys, take the puck, and then make an excellent play with it. He goes to the net. There's a lot with Victor Eklund that you look at and you go, man, playing alongside his brother would be fantastic. Like, they're similar players, but they're different in the approach that they take to make it. Like, they're both very smart. They're both very cerebral. They're both very tactical in getting the puck to the net and getting the puck to the middle of the ice. But whereas his older brother, William, in San Jose, does so with more of a lower paced approach, kind of methodical tic-tac-toe style plays, Victor is more of, if I don't see an open pass, I'm just going to attack the net myself. I'm going to come downhill. He plays a little bit like a running back. He doesn't have quite that high end power in dropping his shoulder like a guy like, for instance, Ryan Leonard, who just entered the NHL. But he's going to try. He's going to go into that fray and come out with the puck and then attack the net with it. So I think with Victor, there's just such a high floor with his game that I think if some of the additional skill does continue to develop, as we've seen this year, then you're getting a player that can be a top 6 winger and bring a lot of offensive moments. Like the best Anton Frondell has looked all year is when he was put with Victor Eklund.
So the way I think about the draft is, first off, you can never say, like, if you draft outside of the top, 12, 13, 6, whatever you pick, you're not getting a top 6 forward. You're not getting a top 4 defenseman. It's just not the way it works, right? Guys miss who are top, sometimes first overall. Sometimes a guy slips and everyone saw it coming and they knew he'd be good. You look at a Cole Caufield, for example, and sometimes a guy shocks everyone. All that is obvious. But is there a general range in your mind where you're like, if you're a team who needs out of this draft to get an impact player for your franchise in the top 4 of your defense or the top 6 of your forwards, where you're like, you pass 12, you pass 15, you pass 8, is there a range in your head where you're like, you need to be in there if you want it from this class based on this class's strength?
I think the issue with putting a number on that is there's a lot of players that have good floors in this group. And then the players that do have the higher ceilings, their floors are kind of the AHL. Like, for example, a guy like Cameron Schmidt in Vancouver in the WHL, this kid's got the Cole Caufield's shot. He plays with so much pace. He goes up and down the ice. He's only 5'7", 5'8", but he's got that legitimate NHL scoring ability. And you look at him and you go, man, like, if this kid gets off a shot on the rush, he can score on an NHL goaltender probably today at times. Like, there's a lot of upside with this kid, and he's kind of a pest. Like, he'll get in there and do a fight. I remember at the Top Prospects game, he was throwing hits. He was getting involved after the whistle. Like, this was a kid that was constantly stirring the pot with the American team at the Top Prospects game. And that's something that carries over to his WHL play as well. So I think the ceiling is fantastic with him, but being a 5'7" forward, you kind of understand that the floor is kind of in the basement. Like, this is a guy that if he doesn't play in your top 6, it's not like he's really going to play on your 4th line. So you have to kind of find the guy that fits there and take the chance on a guy like him. He's going to come with flaws. Sometimes he ignores the defensive zone existing, but that's kind of the issue with this draft class. I talk about a guy like Bill Zonin, who I think has incredible floor. Like, I think that guy's going to play in the NHL, and I have him currently at 17 on my rankings. But the issue is the offensive upside isn't quite there. So I look at him and I go, you're getting a 3rd line guy who's going to be kind of a dog on a bone, forechecks, back checks, paycheck. Like, that's kind of his motto. But the offensive game, you're like, well, if he can make some of the passes you see him making the queue, if you can get his shot off, then maybe he gets to a 40-point guy, 50-point guy. But that's kind of the upside with him. So it's a hard draft class to put a number on. But if you're in the top 10, I think you're getting a guy probably that has that talent, unless you go and take a swing on some of the guys that I think are being a little bit overrated this year.
All right, so where does Jake O'Brien fit in that mold for you? Is he overrated? Is he underrated? Or is that kind of 10 to 14 his range?
I think that 10 to 14 is right in his range. I think he's one of those guys that I think you have a safe floor, and he does bring a little bit more of the skill in the playmaking, particularly, that could make him a top 6 guy. I think he's really smart. He's got the size, he's got the skating, he's got kind of the package. He just needs to put it together mentally at times. I think that's where his kind of flaws exist, because some of the plays he makes this year as a playmaker, I'm just like, man, like the skill, the finesse that he can put on passes, it's really, really impressive. And I really like the way he plays, particularly when he gets some run with Nick Lardis on that team. It's like, man, like now you know how Nick Lardis scored 70 in the OHL this year because he's got a guy like O'Brien passing him the puck sometimes. But with that said, does he kind of fit into that mold of the Danielson, the Casper of, yeah, he could be a second line center, but maybe he's better suited as a really high end third line center? That's kind of the question with a guy like him, because I like all the tools. I like everything he brings, the physical package, but the kind of upper echelon upside is where I worry with him. With that said, like I have him at 13 on my ranking right now. So he's not a guy I would take out of that range by any means.
The way rankings go, you're going to have rankings that are just wildly different from how the draft goes. That's just the name of the game. But with that comes a question of who do you think is worth it if they're on the board? Let's say Detroit sticks at 12. Who do you think is worth it on the board if they're at like pick 6, 7, 8, 9? There's a guy who's there and they're available and you're like, Detroit could get a top talent here, move up for him kind of thing.
My guy this year for that is Victor Eklund, or even Anton Frondell a little bit later. Like if Victor Eklund's on the board at 6, 7, I think you at least consider trading up for him. Like I think he's such a fun talent. He brings so much to Detroit. Like you look at a guy like Lucas Raymond and you see the development that he's had, and I think Victor Eklund could take a path similar to that with a little less skill. But that's kind of the mold that you see with a guy like Victor Eklund. If Anton Frondell's at 8, 9, 10, in Detroit's at 12, pay a pick. Like you guys aren't in the mold of necessarily needing all of your picks at this point. You have so many prospects and young players coming up that trading a third rounder is not going to really matter to you a whole lot. So move up those 2 spots and get the guy that you know could be that second line center, and allow everyone else to kind of slot in nicely. So the 2 Swedes for me, and I know Detroit fans are going to love that because they love their Swedes, are the guys that I'd trade up for in this draft. Unless a guy like James Hagens starts falling, then I know the draft's not centralized this year, but Steve Yzerman better be rushing up on that stage.
We saw Zeev boo him last year, and I think Yzerman was one of the guys on the phone there too. They unfortunately got beaten to it by a pick higher there with Minnesota. A similar question here is, let's say no one is slipping to 12. Is there a guy who you think will be available at 12 who shouldn't be in your mind, where you're like, I think the draft is going to go this way, but this guy's actually like an 8 or 9 guy that you think would be a good pick for Detroit?
A player I think that would be really interesting, I'll give you 2. Lyndon Lakovic is the first one. Plays out in Moose Jaws, captain of that team, was named captain after he returned from injury this year. This kid has such a physical package that I look at, and early in the season, everyone was talking about Roger McQueen, and I'm like, I think this is the guy you actually think Roger McQueen is, guys. Like, Lyndon Lakovic has the size. He's a better skater. He plays with more pace. I'd argue that he's more skilled. The issue is he's not quite as physical as a guy like Roger McQueen, but he has the size. Everything's there to be more physical. It's almost like he doesn't realize he's 6'4" at times, but it doesn't matter because like he dekes and dangles guys and then absolutely rips pucks on net and sets up really nice plays. And when I talked to him this year, one of the things that really stuck out to me was just how like mentally strong that kid is. Like I do a series where I break down games, tape, and game film with these players. And one of the things he said on a play was he took a shot and it went off the goalie's pad and his teammate buried a rebound. And I was talking to him about how sometimes you shoot for rebounds. He goes, yeah, but what I should have done is shot a little bit higher there, got it over his pad and tried to place it a little bit better. And then we don't have to worry about shooting for rebounds. We're just shooting for goals and stuff like that. Like he's thinking the game at a level that not a lot of kids at his age are. And I think understanding that sometimes you need to defer to your teammates and give them the better chance to score is a really intriguing thing with him. This is a kid that thinks the game at a high level. I just think he's still developing and coming into his 6'4" frame. So I think if he figures that out, the sky's the limit for this kid. So if he's there at 12, like that's kind of the player I'd be jumping for. And the other guy is a guy that doesn't get enough love, in my opinion, in the top 15, and that's Cullen Potter. Played for Arizona State this year. He's a small center, but he's a true center, in my opinion. He's a solid defensive player. It took a little bit of time for him to kind of get his footing defensively at the college level, playing for ASU. But this is a kid that has so much playmaking ability, so much play driving ability. Like every time I watched him, whenever things were created, it was because he was the one kind of being the maestro on the ice for that Arizona State team. He's so skilled and such a good playmaker. He reads the ice at a level basically no other player in this draft outside of maybe Michael Misa and James Hagens read it. And he has the finesse to pull off a lot of the things that he does. So yeah, he's a 5'10", 5'9" center, but Braden Point exists. And I think this is a kid that has the actual potential to be that kind of player.
And then, I mean, it's hard to say who is going to be a good second round pick, right? Because that's whoever falls out of your first round pick. Rather, let's ask this. Who's your sweetheart pick, your player that you're like, God, I love this guy outside of like the top names, the big names? Who's a guy who's maybe on your board and not on a lot of other people's boards that you focus on? You're like, he should be a first round pick and he's worth way more attention than he's getting.
I think Michael Sverchek he plays with Brynäs in Sweden. He's a Slovak kid. This is a guy that I watched him earlier in the year and I forget who I was watching and I came across him and I'm like, who is this guy? Like he's got to be a 20-year-old playing at the junior level and just dominating that way. And then I look and he's 17 at the time and I'm like, oh man, like this kid is unreal. The pace he plays with, the speed he plays with, is just kind of daringness to try something. It's really fun to watch. And I look at him and I look at a guy that's a little bit higher up the draft board in a Carter Bear. And I go, if you can get Sverchek in the second round, you don't have to worry about missing out on a guy like Carter Bear or some of these other relentless guys like Victor Eklund in the first round, because Sverchek has that relentlessness. He just plays at such a high speed, at such a high pace that it just puts defenders in compromising positions constantly. Like there are times where he's skating into the offensive zone and he attacks the defender head on and he waits for the defender to kind of decide where he wants to guide him, and then he just simply goes the opposite way. If a defender starts to shade him to the outside, he just simply crosses their face and goes into the inside, and vice versa. Like this kid has a lot of speed, a lot of skill, and he's sometimes a little bit shot happy, sometimes a little bit pass happy. He needs to figure out what he's going to be in the offensive end, but he has all the tools to be a dual threat. So I think he's a guy that in the second round, if he's there, I'm jumping at the chance to grab him.
All right, Tony. Well, there's going to be a lot of conversation about the draft between now and the draft. The Red Wings have done us the favor of pointing the direction the season's headed. So we're definitely going to be talking more. Until then, until you're back on the show, let the people know where they can find your work, because it is now Tony Ferrari high season.
Yes, it is. It is my peak time of year. So you can find all my written work at hockeynews.com. You can follow me on Twitter at @TonyFerrari, and all my game tape videos this year on the Scouting YouTube page. Just search game tape with Tony and you'll find all the videos there. I've got Michael Misa, Matthew Schaefer, all the top names, and even some of the names that will be in that Detroit range. So lots of players to look forward to.
Awesome, Tony. Appreciate it, man. We'll catch up soon in person, but until then, thanks for priming us on the 2025 draft. And we're heading into busy season too, but good luck on yours. This is like tax time for you.
It really is. I look forward to paying all my debts and serving up as much as I can for the audience and the viewers.
Best of luck. Thanks again, brother.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast if you want to support the show, the bonus episodes, the giveaways, the Discord, all of that and lots more. And before we jump in, thank you once again to Tony Ferrari for jumping on and talking hockey prospects with us. All right, let's take some questions here. A lot of them, a lot of passionate folks after the...
I can't believe it.
Yeah, there's a lot of passion after that game. Thomas Gaffney says, is this a fair statement or not? Larkin and Raymond have no business playing in the Four Nations/Olympics if they can't come back as good as they were before the tournament.
Yeah. Selfishly, from a Red Wings perspective, I agree with that. From their perspective, they're free to do whatever they want.
One, I'm positive Larkin's hurt. I don't care what he says. Even the stats that Prashanth was showing, like something's up. Something's noticeably up. He looks slow. And he can't win faceoffs at the rate he used to before. Like something is up.
Not his production.
Yeah, no.
It's a two-part answer. One is you're never going to hold them back from going, and they're obviously going to go. But two, it's not unfair to say, like, hey, there are expectations that you come back and figure out how to do this. So whatever they have to learn, and it's not just them, but for the Red Wings focus, obviously, that's all you're looking at, but all these guys, you're going to want to go represent your country. This is what the players used to do back in the day, and they came back and they played hockey in the Stanley Cup playoffs and leading their team, hopefully, to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and you have to figure out what that looks like. So that's part of it. I don't begrudge anyone who's like, yeah, they came back and were worse. Like, how are you going to be happy about that? But it's not going to change, right? Like, the only way they don't go is if the tournament's not running. Dan Hedin says, hey guys, we were having a conversation at work today, contemplating what the Wings were going to do on defense next year. Do you sign or trade like a Trouba for a top 4 D-man for 1 year so we don't crowd out Sandin Pellikka when he's ready to come up? Other thought is, do we bring up Wallinder to play on the bottom pair with Chiarot? It's hard to find a top 4 guy for a year, right? Like, who are you really going to find there? I'm not saying it's impossible, but there aren't too many names that jump to mind.
Well, it's all comparative, right? Can you find one that's going to do it better than some people did this year? Yeah. Will it be good? Probably not what you want, but you could upgrade. Upgrade, that's the word I'll use. You can upgrade on a 1-year deal, but I don't think you're going to get the level of quality you're probably asking for in this question.
I don't get too ahead of yourself when you're roster planning to say you can't add too many good guys for when you have another good guy. You've never had that problem on this team, so don't make it a problem before it is. If you have a wealth of players who can play at a top 4 level or a top 6 level, that's a great problem to have. Then you have options. Then you have depth. Then you have the ability to move guys out and make decisions that aren't as hard because you're able to utilize your assets. You know, the Nashville Predators of old had a ton of problems, of course, but one of them wasn't having a wealth of defensemen that they couldn't turn into other things. Like, you have a bunch of guys who can play a position really well. Excellent. You deal with that down the road, because you know what's a worse problem? Having nobody who can play that decision really well. On the right side behind Mo Sader, you have 2 replacement level at best defensemen.
That's generous.
Right? So, Mr. Incredible says, observations from a never was hockey player this season. Am I the only one who thinks this team needs to drag this team into the fight type of player? I know that Mazur's on the way to likely making this team if he can get healthy, maybe moving a roster player with a high draft pedigree, Rasmussen, and some sweeteners to Chicago for Burt might help. Got to get bodies to the net offensively. Bick's been calling for it all year. Perimeter shots only work so much until teams figure you out. Holl has to have played his way into a buyout this offseason, right? And there's no way Tuomisto is worse than Holl. Perhaps grabbing a certain Russian defender or 2 on the free agent market is a possibility for a second pair, pushing Chiarot down to where he should be 3rd pair. Thanks for letting me rant. Let's go Red Wings.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Something like that. Like,
yeah.
There's a lot of different options you can go, but the consensus on who needs to go out isn't too differing. Bonds and Armstrong Juice Emporium says, hello, Darkness, my old friend. Our beloved Red Wings are here again. With the Demidov news, it made me wonder, what are the odds we see Buchelnikov in America next year? I know he needs to initiate a contract termination for it to be possible.
I don't have a good feel for that one at all.
Honestly, the whole process is so muddy. Like, what happens in the back end? There's like political petitioning, and
that's why I just, like, with the Demidov stuff, like, it wasn't happening, then all of a sudden it was. It's like, that just screams like a big old duffel bag of cash was just dropped off at the KHL owner's house, and they're like, we're good. Thank you.
And what this situation should teach you is it can happen, but it shouldn't teach you that it will happen predictably, because who knew it was going to happen, right? Like, this stuff is still, it's not the era where players have to defect and like run away from, FSB at the airport kind of thing, but it's not far from that. Like, guys are kind of held there, and the team kind of coerces them into longer contracts than what they want. It's messy. Could Buchelnikov be over sooner? Yeah. Will he? I don't know. It's impossible to tell. I still guess next season is too early, but you never know. Will Bukima says, even when they were winning, it's been hard to really figure out what this team's identity is. They obviously are lacking in areas that would make it clearer, but do you have a feel on what sort of team they're trying to be other than better?
No idea. Based on signings and draft pedigree, they're trying to be the Florida Panthers, a 200-foot pesky, do-it-all type team. They are not that, not even a little bit. They are the furthest team from that in the NHL. So I don't know. I really don't know. Their top 6 forwards are, for the most part, small skilled, which I think is a recipe that you can win with. Tampa's done it a lot. Their bottom 6 is 10 ply. And their defense, though big, isn't mean. So I genuinely don't know. I think it's one of the bigger issues plaguing this team from a macro view.
The optimistic look is you're not locked into anything.
That is true.
Mr. Kuzi says, hit the button. Tankathon. Should we do one simulation?
We may as well.
Sim the lottery from 12th, and Detroit stays 12th because that's the most likely option. Get ready to draft.
Nashville and Chicago winning the lottery would piss me off.
You keep the players in the West. I'm done with having these guys.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Next question from Best James Bond says, can this season's failures not entirely be isolated to the PK? 69.9% success rate.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
67 goals against. Even bumped that to 80%, below average still, and this team has an even goal differential. Justin Holl and Tyler Mott are the two people most accountable. Holl for being abused whenever he's on the ice. Mott for being the PK specialist the team brought in last summer. Two coaching staffs could not improve the PK. The only variable introduced between last year and this year was Mott. Curious what your thoughts are on the abysmal PK.
I chalk it up to lack of talent, but like
you can be bad but still have a good PK.
Yes, exactly. You can scheme up a passable penalty kill. So is it theoretically possible that 3 coaches in a row just have a bad scheme? Yeah. I think that's probably the most likely scenario here.
I don't know. You have to at least look at personnel. Is it scheme though from McLellan?
When it's this bad, it's both.
But we talk a lot about, okay, you have a full offseason of McLellan and Trent Yanni and the ability to implement change and practice and stuff in the offseason. That's when I'll start to think about, okay, multiple administrations, so to speak. But as of right now, I'm more on the personnel than anything. It is still annoying. Like, I agree. I think you can make changes to improve it, but let's see how it is after a full, this is now McLellan's team. This is the pie that he baked kind of thing. He didn't have to just come in and try to save it. And that's not to absolve anyone, but to answer the question, yeah, the PK could have solved a lot of this. It's the same thing as like one player different on the back end, one goalie performing a little bit better than he did, the PK being just average. And then, yeah, you're looking like you're a lot closer to a playoff spot than you are right now.
To be fair, we did see systemic changes on the penalty kill when McLellan came in. So they did try something.
You're right. Yeah, that's fair. They did try something. All right, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Windy Wheel Podcast. Thank you all so very much for tuning in. Just because the Red Wings season is winding down does not mean the content is. To the sponsors of the show, thank you so very much. And to all of our new listeners, welcome. It's not usually, that's a lie. I was going to say it's not usually this bleak. It's not always this bleak on the show. To our Patreon supporters, we could not do the show without you. Patreon.com/Winged Podcast if you want to support the show. And if you want to go above and beyond for the Winged Wheel Podcast, but Patreon's not for you, wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave a rating, a review, the stars, the thumbs up, tell a friend about the show. All of that is stuff that really helps. To our name level supporters on Patreon, we appreciate you so very much. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Akefer, THL Champ, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Glenn Brabham, Sea Lion, Matthew M. Rice, Adam Rose, Adam Zoiza, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Alex Toger, Anna Sleeman, Asher Killian, Beer League Legend, Best James Bond, Bingo Bango, Carl, Bertina Ninaluski, CB55, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scobie, Craig Kibble, Jenny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Eric Hill, Give Blood Fight Probert, Grand Rapids Girly, Griffin God Creatives, Hattrick Sandine Pelica, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, James McLean, a.k.a. Jambo, Jeff Pridemore, Jennifer Morris, John Ingalls, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Lunchbox, Mark Hernandez, Marty, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, Mr. Kuzi, Now I Have to Learn How to Click on a Macintosh, Podgy713, R.A., Richard Perkins, Roy Donk, Sam Bankson, Stephen Ortlieb, That's What I Appreciates About You, Tiger McDougal, brand new name level supporter, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Wings fan in Chicago, Eiser Plan Stan, Aaron Hudson, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Aaron, Albert Johansson, All Motor No Hands, and Stanislavski, Another Future Consideration, Big Starfish, Bands of Maker Dance, Bellingham Acid Balls, Bex, C.E. Hayes, Chris Flinsky, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Drop the Puck, Dylan Larkin, Trade Sacrifice, Eric Nance, Evan Beckner, Gene Sullivan, Grepsky, Griffey Boy, James Pridemore, Johnny Page, Jeremiah Dobo, Jim, JM Rhapsody, Josh Yelton, Chaotic Monkey, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Linda Hull, Lonnie's Own, Lucas Raymond, Matt Keeler, Mitch Minier, noted Soderblom worshiper Joey Jojo Shabadoo, Ophelia, As Good As It Gets, Ryan M, Sandy P, Right Hand D, Shame on a Chungus who tried to run game on a Chungus, Shit in the Bed for Schaefer, Steven, stopping an Islanders game to comment, That Other Guy, The Hodag, The Hat 123, Trent Thorough, our good friend Wings fan in St. Louis, Scott, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much, folks. We can make it through this.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.